Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like absolute precision.
Right, very
Like
human.
engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is. But when we look at the natural world, specifically at plants, we often assume it's just this chaotic mess of green.
Oh, absolutely. To the untrained eye, a forest or even just a garden bed looks entirely random. We see leaves and flowers and just assume nature is, winging it, growing wherever it finds sunlight.
Exactly. But today, we are going to completely shatter that assumption for you. We have an incredible set of sources for this deep dive today, a highly detailed set of visual ultimate revision notes covering the morphology of flowering plants.
It's a fantastic resource.
It really is. And the mission for you listening today is simple, but I promise it's going to change how you look at every tree, bush, and vegetable. We are going to systematically decode the structural language of plants.
Right, moving from the very bottom to the top.
Exactly. Tracing the architecture from the roots hidden underground all the way up to the incredibly complex geometry of their flowers and fruits.
And it really is a strict architectural blueprint. I mean, plant morphology isn't just a list of intimidating Latin vocabulary words.
Though there are a few of those.
Well, yeah, there are a few. But every single structure we're going to explore today, whether it's a leaf or a petal, it tells a specific story. It's a functional blueprint of how a plant anchors itself, feeds itself, and ultimately ensures its own survival.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate in these notes, there is a mind-bending fact that completely caught me off guard.
The potato fact.
Yes. It turns out some of our most familiar foods are absolute architectural tricksters. So we all know a carrot grows underground, right? So a carrot is a modified root. That makes total sense. But a potato, which also grows entirely underground, is not a root. It is actually a modified stem.
Yeah. It's a brilliant piece of evolutionary disguise.
But wait, if a stem's entire job is to shoot upward and, hold leaves up to the sun, what kind of evolutionary loophole drove the potato stem to bury itself underground?
Well, it comes down to storage and survival. The potato plant evolved to push a portion of its stem underground to swell up and store just massive amounts of starch.
Wow.
And you can actually prove it's a stem.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed the eyes on a potato when you leave it in the pantry too long?
Oh, yeah, when it gets all creepy and sprouty.
Exactly. Those eyes are actually nodes, and they have tiny axillary buds in them. Roots don't have nodes or buds.
Wait, really? Only stems have nodes?
Only stems. So functionally and structurally, that potato is a stem just hiding in the dirt.
That is wild. And it perfectly highlights why we need to start our breakdown at the actual foundation. Let's look at the true underground architecture, the root system.
Right, let's start at the bottom. So all true roots have a very specific origin point. Inside a seed, there's a plant embryo. And one part of that embryo is called the radicle. A true primary root develops directly from the elongation of that radicle pushing downward.
But once that radicle pushes down, reading through this, it seems like plants choose one of three structural strategies.
Yeah, they do.
First is the taproot system. This is your classic deep diving anchor. You have that main primary root growing straight down like a spike.
Like a carrot, actually.
Right, with smaller lateral branches coming off it.
Yeah.
The notes say mustard plants use this too.
It's a great system for reaching deep water tables. But the second strategy is the fibrous root system.
Okay, how is that different?
Well, in plants like wheat, which is a monocot, that initial primary root actually dies off pretty quickly. It's short-lived.
Oh, so it loses its main anchor.
Yeah, but instead, a thick cluster of roots erupts right from the base of the stem.
Like a dense mop head.
Exactly like a mop head. It creates a wide, shallow net. And that is incredibly efficient at rapidly absorbing surface water after, like a light rain before it can evaporate.
Makes sense. And then there's the third strategy, which honestly feels like the plant just breaking its own rules. The adventitious root system.
My personal favorite.
Yeah, these roots arise from parts of the plant other than the radicle.
Yes. Whenever plant needs structural support that a traditional root just can't provide, it gets creative.
Right. The notes mention monstera plants.
Yeah, or think of those massive banyan trees.
Oh, with the thick wooden pillars dropping straight down from their branches.
Exactly, to prop themselves up. Or even just grass spreading across your lawn. Those are adventitious roots.
Okay, so that's the macro view of roots. But if we zoom way, way in on the actual microscopic tip of a growing root, there are 4 distinct zones. And reading through the sources, I couldn't help but picture this like a construction site assembly line.
I like that analogy.
Hap-
How do you see the breakdown?
Well, at the very bottom, pushing aggressively through the abrasive dirt and rocks, you have the root cap. It's a thimble-like protective cover.
Right?
So that's the hard hat of the root.
Spot on. And just behind that hard hat, you have the region of meristematic activity.
The meristematic zone.
Yeah, these are tiny, thin-walled cells with dense protoplasm, and their entire job is to divide over and over again.
It's just constantly multiplying.
It is pure, rapid cellular generation.
Right. So that's where the raw materials are manufactured on our construction site. Then, moving upward from the tip, we hit the region of elongation.
Where things stretch out.
Exactly. This is where those newly generated cells undergo rapid enlargement. This zone is actually what causes the root to grow in length. It's like taking the raw steel beams and stretching them out to build the skyscraper.
And finally, above that, the chaos of growth settles down a bit in the region of maturation.
Right, the final detailing of the building.
Exactly. Here, the cells differentiate into their final forms. And most critically, epidermal cells in this region form these delicate, thread-like root hairs.
Oh, and those fine hairs are what actually do the heavy lifting, right? Absorbing the water and minerals from the soil.
They do. But here's an easily missed exam tip from the notes. Roots do something else too.
What's that?
They aren't just drinking straws. They actually synthesize plant growth regulators.
Hormones.
Yes, hormones. So they are constantly chemically communicating with the parts of the plant above ground.
Man, it's like a hidden communication network. But let's follow that upward growth. We've secured the foundation, the plant is anchored and drinking. But all of this underground effort is really in service of reaching the sun.
Right, photosynthesis.
So we burst through the soil into the ascending axis, the stem.
And just as the root has a specific origin in the seed, the radicle, the stem, develops from a different part of the embryo called the plumule.
Plumule, okay.
And structurally, a stem is defined by a very specific alternating pattern. Nodes and internodes.
Nodes being the structural joints where the leaves attach. Right.
Yeah.
And internodes just being the empty highway space between them.
Precisely. And tucked into the angle where the leaf meets the stem, an angle called the axil, you find buds.
Axillary buds.
Yes. These axillary buds have the potential to grow into whole new branches or flowers.
So let's talk about those leaves, the solar panels of the plant. The basic anatomy is pretty elegant when you break it down. You have the leaf base, which attaches to the node.
Right.
Interestingly, the notes point out that in some plants like legumes, this base is swollen, acting almost like a flexible hinge.
Called a pulvinus.
Pulvinus, right. Or in monocots, the base can actually expand into a sheath that wraps completely around the stem.
Like corn.
Yeah. Then you have the petiole, which is the little stalk, and finally the lamina, the main broad blade where the photosynthesis actually happens.
But if you look closely at that broad blade, you'll see the venation, the intricate arrangement of the veins.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, and botanists use this as a massive cheat code to figure out what kind of plant they're looking at without even seeing a flower.
Right. Because if you have a dicotyledonous plant, a dicot, they typically have reticulate venation. Yeah. The veins form this complex, sprawling network. I picture it like the winding, interconnected cobblestone streets of an old European city.
That's a great visual. But monocotyledonous plants, monocots, generally have parallel venation.
So the veins run straight up and down.
Parallel to each other, yes.
Like the perfectly straight grid plan avenues in a modern city like New York.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just how the leaf is built internally, it's how the plant chooses to arrange those leaves on the stem.
Which is called phyllotaxy.
Phyllotaxy, yes.
And the sources list 3 main patterns here. Alternate arrangement, where you just have one single leaf per node, staggering left, right, up the stem.
Like stairs?
Yeah. Then opposite arrangement, where 2 leaves sit at the same node, staring directly across at each other.
Yeah.
And whorled, where more than 2 leaves circle a single node like a collar. But here's the thing I kept thinking about. Why does the plant care?
Why does the pattern matter?
Yeah. Why go through the trouble of coding a specific mathematical pattern for leaf placement?
Because it is an absolute cutthroat battle for sunlight.
Really?
Think about it. A leaf that sits in the shade of another leaf is useless. It's just dead weight.
Oh, of course.
So phyllotaxy the plant, meticulously calculating the optimal geometry. It ensures that as the sun moves across the sky, every single leaf gets maximum exposure without casting a shadow on the leaf directly below it.
Wow. It's just relentlessly optimizing.
Always. Every single structure is optimized. But eventually, once the plant has gathered enough solar energy, its primary objective shifts.
It's time to reproduce.
Exactly. It has enough resources, and it is time to secure the next generation. The shoot apical meristem, the growing tip, undergoes a dramatic transformation into a floral meristem.
The plant is preparing to bloom.
Yes.
Which brings us to the arrangement of the flowers, known as the inflorescence. And the plant basically has two choices here, according to the notes. The first is racemose,
Where the main axis just keeps growing.
right. It's unlimited. It leaves a trail of flowers behind it, with the newest, youngest buds always at the very top. This is called acropetal succession.
And the alternative is cymose inflorescence. Here, the main growing tip actually transforms into a flower itself.
So the growth is limited.
Exactly. Because the tip terminates in a flower, it stops growing upward. The oldest flowers at the top and newer ones have to branch out and bloom below it in basipetal order.
Okay, so let's zoom right in on the flower itself, because if the leaf was a solar panel, the flower is a highly complex, precision-engineered mating beacon.
It really is.
The entire structure sits on a base called the receptacle, or the thalamus. And arranged on this base are 4 essential rings, or whorls.
Now, what's fascinating here is the mnemonic provided in the notes to remember the order of these whorls.
Oh, yes. Moving from the outside of the flower inward to the center.
Right. Can please stop calling?
Can please stop calling?
Yeah.
Okay, I love a good mnemonic, but before we get lost in the botany jargon, translate that for me. What are these layers actually doing?
Let's break it down. CAN stands for calyx. This is the outermost whorl, made of sepals.
Those are the little green leaf-like structures at the base of a flower, right?
Exactly. And their job is purely protective. They shield the delicate inner parts when the flower is still just a closed bud.
Got it. Protection.
Next is please, which stands for corolla. This is the whorl of petals.
The showy part.
Yes, their job is the opposite of protection. They are brightly colored and scented to be as attractive as possible to pollinators.
Attraction. Okay, what about stop?
Stop is the Androecium.
Right.
This is the male reproductive system made up of the stamens, which produce the pollen.
Okay.
And finally, calling is the Gynoecium right in the dead center. These are the carpels, the female reproductive organs that house the ovules.
Okay, so calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium, protection, attraction, male, female.
Exactly. Though I should point out the notes mention a cool exception.
Right, the lily.
Yeah. Sometimes the calyx and the corolla aren't distinct. They look like one uniform layer. When that happens, botanists call it a perianth.
That's a great detail. Now, to truly understand a flower, the notes say you have to look at its symmetry.
Right, it's geometry.
And there are 3 types. First is actinomorphic, which is radial symmetry. You can divide the flower into equal mirrored halves along ANY radial plane passing through the center.
Mustard flowers do this.
Right, or datura. It's basically like cutting a pizza. Any straight cut through the middle gives you equal halves.
But then you have zygomorphic. This is bilateral symmetry. The flower can only be divided into similar halves in one specific vertical plane.
Like peas and beans.
Yeah, it's like human symmetry. There's only one way to draw a line down the middle of a face to get a mirrored left and right side.
Why do that, though? Why limit the symmetry? I mean, a pizza seems way easier to land on if you're a bug.
It creates a specific lock and key mechanism. A zygomorphic flowers often evolve to force a very specific insect, like a particular species of bee, to enter the flower in exactly one orientation.
Oh.
Yeah, that guarantees the pollen gets brushed onto the exact right spot on the bee's back.
That is incredibly clever. The third type, by the way, is asymmetric, like the canna flower. It cannot be divided into similar halves by any center plane at all. It just does its own uneven thing.
Right. But beyond symmetry, there is this concept of the ovary position. And this is fascinating because it's essentially a slider on the thalamus.
Yeah. Where does the plant choose to place its most precious cargo?
Exactly.
So first you have hypogynous. This is where the ovary occupies the highest position, sitting above all the other floral parts. It's a superior ovary, like in a mustard plant or a brinjal.
Right.
Then you have perigynous, where the ovary sits on the rim of the thalamus, essentially at the same level as the petals.
That's a half-inferior ovary seen in roses, plums, and peaches.
And finally, epigynous. Here, the thalamus actually grows up and completely swallows the ovary.
And closes it completely.
Right. The ovary is inferior, sitting completely below the petals. Cucumbers, sunflowers, and guavas do this. But why? Why bury the ovary like that?
Well, imagine you are a plant living in an environment with aggressive herbivores or maybe harsh frosts.
Okay.
You don't want the ovules, your unborn offspring, sitting exposed on top of the flower where they could be easily eaten or frozen.
No, you'd want them protected.
Exactly. So you evolve an inferior ovary, burying it deep beneath the tough tissue of the thalamus for maximum armor.
Wow. Okay, here is where it gets really interesting for me. Estivation.
The packing arrangement.
Yes. This is the mode of arrangement of sepals or petals in the floral bud before the flower fully opens. And the notes outline 4 types, which I immediately pictured as the different ways you can pack a suitcase.
Let's hear it. I want to hear this analogy.
Okay, you have valvate estivation, where the margins of the petals just touch each other in a ring without overlapping at all. Like in Calotropis,
Yeah.
it's neat, it's tidy, it's like laying your folded clothes perfectly side by side in the suitcase.
Makes sense. Then there's twisted estivation.
Right.
One margin of a petal overlaps the margin of the next one in a regular, consistent direction. It creates a spiraling pinwheel effect like in a China rose.
That's like rolling your clothes to save space and packing them in a tight spiral. Then you have imbricate estivation. The margins overlap, but in no particular regular direction. It's irregular, like in Gulmacher.
So that's the messy packer.
That is haphazardly shoving your clothes into the suitcase wherever they fit and forcing the lid shut.
Classic. And finally, the most complex one, vexillary or papilionaceous estivation.
Right.
This is found in peas and beans.
Yeah, this one is like nesting Russian dolls. There's one massive outer petal called the standard that overlaps 2 lateral petals called wings.
And those wings, in turn, overlap 2 tiny inner petals called keels.
It's an incredibly elaborate packing job, but all of this intricate architecture, the symmetry, the packing, the precise placement of the ovary, it is all driving toward one singular event.
Fertilization.
Right. So the flower does its job, the pollinator visits, and the colorful petals fall away. What's left? We enter the final act, we transition from flower to fruit, and here we have to talk about placentation.
The arrangement of the ovules within the ovary.
Exactly. And the sources show 5 main blueprints here. Marginal placentation is like a pea pod, where the ovules attach along a ridge down the margin.
Simple enough. But axial placentation has the ovules attached to a central axis inside a multi-chambered ovary.
If you slice a tomato or a lemon in half, you are looking right at axial placentation.
Exactly. Then there's parietal, where ovules develop on the inner wall of the ovary, like in mustard. Sometimes it even forms a false septum.
A false wall.
Yeah. Then free central, where ovules are on a central axis, but with no dividing walls at all, like dianthus. And basal, where a single ovule develops right at the base of the ovary, like in a sunflower or marigold.
And here is the massive biological rule that drops in the notes, the big transformation. Once fertilized, the ovary develops into the fruit.
And the ovules develop into the seeds.
It is the ultimate metamorphosis, and the fruit itself is composed of 3 layers. The epicarp on the outside the skin, the mesocarp in the middle, which is often the fleshy, sweet part we eat, and the endocarp, the hard, stony inner layer that houses the seed. Now, the notes mention that mangoes are a type of fruit called a drupe, which developed from, and I quote, monocarpillary superior ovaries.
Sounds complicated.
Yeah, okay, time out. Monocarpillary superior, what in English, please?
Fair enough. It just means the flower had a single carpal mono, meaning one female reproductive organ.
Okay, 1 carpal.
And superior means, as we discussed earlier with hypogynous flowers, it sat above the other petals on the thalamus.
Oh. So from that simple setup, you get a giant fleshy mango.
Much better, right? And deep inside that mango's hard pit is the seed. Now, we have to differentiate between dico and monocot seeds here.
Right, the seed matrix. Dico seeds, like a pea or a gram, have 2 cotyledons. Those are the thick, fleshy, embryonic leaves that have absorbed all the food reserves.
When you split a peanut perfectly in half, you are looking at the 2 cotyledons. They also have a seed coat with a testa and tegmen, a scar called a hilum, and a tiny pore called a micropyle.
And crucially, they are non-endospermic at maturity. They've used it all up.
But monocot seeds, like maize or corn, play by different rules. They don't absorb all their food into the leaf. They are endospermic.
So they keep a separate, massive tissue of nutrient reserves.
Exactly. They only have one large, shield-shaped cotyledon called the scutellum.
But what really stuck out to me here is how armored the monocot seed is.
Oh, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is essentially a heavily fortified survival bunker.
The bunker.
Think about it. Monocots often grow in harsh, exposed environments like open grasslands, so their embryonal axis is heavily protected. The future shoot, the plumule, is enclosed in a rigid protective sheath called the coleoptile.
Okay.
And the future root, the radicle, is enclosed in its own protective sheath called the coleorhiza. They are built to endure until the exact right moment to germinate.
Wow. Okay, we've gone from the root pushing into the soil all the way up to the armored seed bunker. And at the very end of our notes today, they give us the ultimate code breaker.
The floral formula.
Yes. Botanists take all of this complex vocabulary we just learned and condense it into a semi-technical floral formula. It looks like an algebra equation.
It's a universal language. You can describe the entire structural reality of a plant in a single line.
Okay, so a circle with a cross inside means actinomorphic symmetry.
Radial symmetry, right. Or a percentage sign means zygomorphic.
Then you have the symbol for male and female for bisexual. K represents the calyx, C for corolla, P for perianth, A for Androecium, and G for Gynoecium.
And there are little tricks, right? If parts are fused together, you put their number in brackets.
Like parentheses.
Yeah, that's called cohesion. But if parts of different whorls are attached to each other, say the stamens are stuck to the petals, you draw a line connecting their letters. That's adhesion.
So what does this all mean? Let's actually apply this code breaker to one specific family that the notes highlight. Solanaceae.
Widely known as the potato family.
A massively economically important family. Potatoes, tomatoes, brinjal, they all belong here. We already established they have underground stems in the potato, reticulate venation, and simple alternate leaves. But look at their floral formula. It literally looks like a Wi-Fi password. Let's translate it.
Go for it.
Okay, first, symbols. Bisexual and a circle with a cross, meaning radial actinomorphic symmetry. Next, K parenthesis 5.
That means the calyx has 5 sepals, and the brackets mean they are fused together. Valvate estivation, usually.
Next, C parenthesis 5.
The corolla has 5 petals, also fused.
Next, a 5. 5 stamens. But there is a line drawn over the C and the A.
This means the stamens are physically adhering to the petals. They are epipetalous.
Finally, G parenthesis 2. The gynoecium is bicarpellary. The 2 is in brackets, meaning the carpels are fused syncarpous.
And there's a line drawn underneath the G.
Meaning it is a superior ovary sitting above everything else with axial placentation. We just read the structural code of a tomato plant.
We did. It's incredible. We started with a radical pushing blindly into the dark soil, mapped the network of dicot leaves battling for sunlight, deciphered the geometry of the floral whorls, and uncovered the survival tactics of the seed bunker.
Every single morphological term we covered today, from phyllotaxy to endocarp to axial placentation, it is all just vocabulary. But it's the vocabulary used to read the incredible survival story of a plant.
And once you know that language, it completely changes how you see the world.
It really does.
So here's a final thought for you to take with you. The next time you are walking down the produce aisle, or maybe just out in your garden, don't just see a piece of food. Look closely at it.